Hey, folks. Welcome to the Managing with Mind and Heart podcast. And I am one of your co-hosts, Ethan Nash. And with me today is my partner in crime here, Mr. Mike Nash. Hi,
Hello,
Mike.
everyone. Good to be here. Nice to
Good
see
to
you.
be here. Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah. All right. Simmer down. Okay. Good. So we have a live audience today. And additionally, if you're only listening to this, we're also recording some video. So we now have a video version of our podcast, or at least some of them. You can go watch it on our YouTube channel. But yeah, we have a live audience. So that's exciting. Yeah, give it up. Give it up. Give it up. Thank you. Great.
Hi, buddy.
All right.
Sit down. Sit down, everybody. Sit down, everybody. It's okay. Sit down.
Mike, how you doing today?
I'm good, Ethan. You're really good. Yeah. And how about you?
I'm doing pretty well. It's good to be with you again, podcasting. It's been a bit of a gap. We've kind of done our own thing for the last several months. I've recorded some podcasts with some other people. You've recorded podcasts with other people. So we are reunited and it feels good.
It feels so good. Really does feel good. I've missed you in this context. I really enjoy these conversations.
Yeah, me too. And I'm excited for our conversation today. Let's talk about autonomy a little bit. Autonomy in the workplace. I think maybe for a lot of managers, leaders, just professionals in general, we've heard a lot about autonomy. I know autonomy is kind of front and center right now, and a lot of the just research around building healthy cultures and motivating workforces and so on and so forth. So we've heard probably that autonomy is critical for building morale, for building engagement, again, building productivity, for retaining your workforce and all that good stuff. And I guess I want to start off with the question here to you, which is, I guess why? why is autonomy so critical for these things that I think we would all say, yes, we want that. We want engagement and morale and so on and so forth.
Yeah. It's such a deep human need to have control over one's environment. It's built into us. It's an evolutionary function. Our ability to control our environment helps us to feel somewhat powerful. It helps us with our self-esteem. Without autonomy, it's been proven that people not only don't produce as much, in some cases, they're not as healthy physically. They don't live as long. We know that employees will, leave jobs for lower paying jobs sometimes for more autonomy. It's just this deep human need that helps us. It's all about control, right? Isn't that that's one of the main pieces that we're talking about here, is that need to actually have control.
Right. Yeah. It's the need to have control, the desire to be self-directed at some level. Right. I like how you mentioned the, autonomy or the lack thereof also relates to people's just well-being and health in general. It reminds me of the famous Whitehall studies. And just real briefly, I think I can get this right, but I think in the UK and around I think they did the study between the 1960s and 1990s, where they were looking in government agencies there. And basically they were looking at the stress levels of people at different levels on the org chart. So across the different hierarchies, like what are people's stress levels? And so what I think a lot of people thought and what they predicted was that, those at the very top are going to have higher stress levels, right? Because they have this job, they have a lot to handle, they have a lot on their plate, a lot of responsibility, right? The buck stops with them, so to speak. But what they found out is, as you probably guessed at this point, it was the opposite, right? It was actually the people um, the lowest on the org chart that had the higher stress levels, which over time led to more health related issues. And to me, and I think what the study ended up concluding, or the researchers concluded, was that, it has to do with a lack of agency. And the less agency you have, the less safe at some level it feels in your environment, and you react mentally, physically, um, and that's an issue. that's
Yeah.
that's an issue. So yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
It's the, the inverse of having autonomy, of course, is not having control. In fact, even feeling controlled, right? And that's such a hard thing for humans to handle on any kind of ongoing basis. That feeling that something else, whether it's rules or someone else, has undue control over you. You feel out of control, like you said. You feel this lack of agency. It hurts self-esteem. It causes people to kind of do a bit of a shutdown, both kind of physically, their brains sort of shut down and go into that sympathetic nervous system kind of thing, or just kind of shut down, which is why productivity and engagement are so clearly impacted by that ability to have control.
yeah. And I know that several researchers, as well as Daniel Pink in his book Drive, talks about autonomy as one of the
Mhm.
key factors of motivation. And as you were saying, to your point, having uncontrollable circumstances actually generates a threat response in the brain,
Absolutely.
right?
And of course, then when I'm in that mode, right, fight, flight, or freeze at
Mm-hmm.
work, I can't do the good stuff, right? I can't be
Right.
creative, and I can't be empathetic, and I just can't, right? I'm in survival mode at that point.
In survival mode, yeah. And it almost feels like a dramatic way to think about it, right? I don't have a lot of autonomy at work. I'm in survival mode. And it's
Yep.
probably not feeling that way always consciously.
Right.
Sometimes it might be, maybe. But I think subconsciously, the point here is they're not going to be bringing their best selves to the work,
Yep.
right? They're not going to be, once again, as motivated to put the cognitive and physical effort into the work that they could. And yeah, but I guess where I want to go next, if you're ready for this, is I want to give our listeners, our audience, some ideas for how we might solve for autonomy in a sense. Like, how can we help figure out how to give our employees more autonomy? Um, but I guess even before I get there, like, what might be some of the roadblocks
Hmm.
that managers face with giving their employees some autonomy? Like, I'm a manager, I know autonomy is important. Where do I start?
Oh my gosh, so many
I
roadblocks.
think I just gave like three different questions in there to you. So
You did. I'll pick one.
choose your route.
I like those. The roadblocks. I mean, we're not going to get into all these for now for sure. But man, there's, as a manager, I might already have so much bureaucracy and so much red tape that I don't even have a lot of autonomy. So it's hard to
Yeah.
give others autonomy. There's so many things we could go on, but a couple of them that occur to me here is one. I think that. Two that I want to talk about. One is our own awareness of the need for autonomy, but also the conversations we should be having with our employees that we're not. And I guess I start with, as a manager, am I even aware of how big this is, how important this is, including for myself? And if I don't recognize my own needs for autonomy, what often happens, I think, is we end up with control battles, and we don't call them that, and they don't necessarily look like I'm having control battles with my employees, but it's this feeling of there's only so much pie, and and I want most of it because I want the pie being control, right? And as manager, I have my own need for control, and
Mm,
it feels good, right, to have control, and it feels good to direct sometimes, and it feels good to delegate and air traffic control, and I
mm,
have all this, the more autonomy I can take for myself, honestly, according to research, the happier I am. And if I'm not aware of what I'm doing, I'm taking too much pie, right? And I'm not leaving enough for the employee. And now the
yeah.
employee is wanting autonomy, and that could look to me as a manager, if I'm not aware of what's happening, that can look like rebelliousness, that can look like insubordination, that can look like stubbornness, all these things I'm seeing in the employee, or shutdown, or they don't care. And what might really be happening is I'm taking too much control and not giving enough of it. And so I
Right.
start with that. I think the first roadblock is maybe my own my own need for control and being willing to look at that and monitor it and let go, right?
Yeah, yeah. I think that's a really interesting insight. It's like this tug of war going on, right? And again, it might not be happening consciously. It's
Right,
probably not.
right.
But I'm saying, okay, I understand autonomy is important. I want to give my staff, my team, my employees autonomy. But deep down, I need my own autonomy. I'm a human
Yes,
being too.
right.
Managers are people too, right? So,
Most of them.
without
Yeah.
most of them, not the AI ones, but so it's, I guess, getting just aware of the fact, having some self awareness that you also need autonomy is a place to start.
Hmm.
But how I guess my question would be like, how can you as a manager ensure that you're having your autonomy need met at the same time you're meeting your employees' autonomy needs? Or by definition of being a manager, you kind of have to self sacrifice in a sense here. That's your job.
There's a whole nother podcast right there. The
Yeah.
idea that we as managers, the more resourced we are, the less likely we're going to go into our management role trying to get our needs met by employees. So that's one, just being aware of that need, having that need met in other ways, maybe even recognizing that as a manager, I automatically have more autonomy already than you do as an employee, just because of where I am in the organization.
Right.
So counting my blessings in a sense of what I already have autonomy wise, finding outlets for creativity, but again, remembering that my job, which is really hard for managers and takes a lot of EQ, right? Is I'm actually here not just to air traffic control things. I'm here to empower you. I'm here to enable you, and that's a
Hmm.
higher level, higher calling. It's a higher level way of looking at management.
Right. Right. Yeah. I like. You also mentioned earlier one of the roadblocks, meaning just like there's a lot of red tape in the organization, a lot of bureaucracy. That can certainly get in the way. One thing I've noticed just in my own career and my work is one of the major roadblocks to autonomy is the fact that there's not a lot of clarity in the organization about even goals, what we're trying to achieve, what our values are. There's a lot of different areas that you create clarity in an organization. And it might sound counterintuitive, but the less clear you are, the less autonomy people end up having. Because without the clarity, now I just have to direct maybe each and every task,
Everything, right?
right? As opposed to here's the big picture, here's the context in which we're working, and now you figure out how to make that happen. In other words, here's the goal, here's what we're aiming for, here's a few parameters of how to get to that goal, but figure out how to get to that goal.
Right.
Right? And so creating clarity is a big step, and that's a big more kind of organizational systems aspect of it. But coming back to more the management level,
I'm just one thing you said there about expectations and clarity. That is organizational for sure. And the more bureaucracy, is that how you can't say that word?
bureaucracy.
Bureaucracy. There you go. Bureaucracy. The more of that stuff I have over my head as a manager, the more controlled I feel, the
Mm.
less I have to give you. And then also, as you said, I love that. If you're my employee and I give you really clear expectations and tell you all the stuff up front, that can feel over controlling kind of. But I got to remember, like you said, if the more I give you up front, the more I get to let go now. Right?
Mm-hmm.
That's good. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So if I'm a manager,
Yeah.
which I am, I guess,
You are.
um, and I want to start finding ways to give autonomy to my team, my employees. I'm understanding this big concept that autonomy is important. I'm understanding that the more clarity I can create with them, the more autonomy they end up with the long run. Where do I start with that? Like, what's the conversation that needs to happen between either me and either my managers or my employees to figure out ways to give these autonomy boosts?
Lots of possibilities, and we've talked about this in a previous podcast. There's a real particular kind of algorithm that maybe not the right word, but a way of organizing tasks that we can talk about. It's the parameters of freedom. I think you'd agree that the bottom line here is you got to talk about this. I know that sounds really obvious, but there's a lot of things in the workplace, a lot of aspects of management that we sometimes just kind of skip that step, like talking
Mhm.
about it with employees.
Right.
How can we have great staff meetings? Let's talk about how we can make these awesome. Like that's a conversation to be had as opposed to just trying to do good staff meetings and then being frustrated if they don't work out.
Right.
Same thing here, right? Let's actually talk about autonomy. Let's talk about how you're feeling about the autonomy you have. Let's talk about how we can get you more autonomy. What would you like more of or less of? So I want to start with that, just the basics of are we willing to have a conversation with our
Good.
employees during our one-on-ones, that kind of thing. What do you think?
I love that. Let's just give a few concise questions that a manager can ask their team right now in this area, just a starting point. And I'll start with one. And
Please.
this is going to be mind blowing to you all. This is going to be the most epic and profound question that you'll ever hear, which is,
Hold on here.
do you feel like you have enough autonomy in your job?
Mind blown.
Wow. Can you
That's great.
believe that? In fact, give it up. Give it up. Yes.
The best
Thank you.
question ever.
Thank you. Thank you.
Mic drop. Mic drop right there. Yeah,
Right.
that's great.
Seriously, just yeah.
Yeah, right there. Yeah. Do you feel like you have enough autonomy? That's a
Yeah.
really good question. Where might be some areas that you would like some more autonomy? Where would be areas you'd like to have a little bit more control? Where would you like to
Mhm.
have a little bit more ability to exercise your creativity? Those are great questions. And you know what? Side note, Ethan, sometimes I've talked about this with managers in the past. There's a little bit of fear sometimes about asking questions about this, about a lot of topics. But anytime you're asking, what would you like more of or less of, or, et cetera, there's often this fear. If we're not aware of it, we let that get in the way. And the fear would be what? I
Yeah.
might hear something that I don't like. I might hear something I can't fix. I might
Yeah.
hear something I can't give you. What do you think about that?
I think it's true, and I found myself in that I guess paradox as well at times, where it's like I want to ask for feedback in certain areas, but I'm fearful that I'm going to get all that feedback, and I don't have the tools, the resources, the time to then make that happen. And then what is that going to look like to the people that gave me feedback? I don't care about the feedback. I didn't take it seriously. I didn't advocate for them. So I think it's a serious and real fear, and it is something to be aware of. Be careful what you ask for, or be
Yeah.
careful what questions you ask if you're not ready to handle the response.
Yeah, and what I like to tell managers around that fear is to just recognize a couple things. These people you're talking to are adults, and these people understand that you're not magic. They understand that you're not Santa Claus. They actually get that you have limitations. They understand that. They're to not ask those questions because you're afraid you might not be able to give people what they want means you're not going to ask a lot of questions, and you're
Right.
going to be pretty close to feedback and
Yeah.
knowing what's really going on. I would rather know what my employees want and where they're struggling, even if I can't fix it. Now, I hope I can help them, but even if I can't, it's sure helpful to know.
Yeah. And sometimes it can just be helpful of just calling out this, elephant in the room if it is, which is, hey, I want to get your feedback. I want to talk to you about these things. And hey, that, we'll see what we can do with this.
Yes.
We do have constraints that we're working in, but I just want everything to be out on the table, right? So
Yep.
I think just calling it out that I'm not here to get your feedback and then I'm going to magically make all that happen. But like, yeah, this is a conversation. Let's figure out what we can solve for, what we can't solve for right now, and that we might have to solve for later, and so on and so forth.
Yep.
Uh,
So, oh, yeah, good.
well, I just wanted to ask you. I know that again, part of this conversation that you might have with your employee is like, where do you want more autonomy in your job, which includes where where might you like or want some more just decision making freedom overall in your job, right, and in different roles. And so how I know you have a cool way of thinking about this. How might you what's your framework for navigating the conversation about maybe the range of decision making freedom that somebody has and can have in their job.
Yeah, that's really what we're talking about. When you think about autonomy, you are talking about decision making. right? Because when you think about what that means, right? Deciding how to fix a problem,
Right.
deciding how to create a process,
Yeah.
they're all
Deciding
decisions.
what to do next.
Exactly. It's
Do
all
now,
this.
do later. Yeah.
That's exactly right. And so the framework that have really worked for me is this there's basically these four parameters of freedom. They start from most autonomy to least. And so a one is just do it. These
Okay.
are parts of your job. If I'm your manager, these are parts of your job that I trust you to do, and you can make those decisions or fix those problems when they come up. You don't even have to tell me about it later. It's your job. Now, it doesn't mean you can't come ask me if you want some help or some advice or
Mhm.
whatever, right? But it's yours, hands off. As far as I'm
Okay.
concerned. Now, I may check in every so often in a general way, but just do it. That's yours. A two, do and then tell, right? This is still the same level of autonomy as number one in the sense that it's yours. Fix these problems, do these things when they come up, solve these problems, or create these systems. But let me know on the back end. Now, what do you think is why? Why? Like, why might there be areas that I would want to know after you've made a decision?
Oh gosh, there's probably tons of reasons. I mean, one is just being coordinated on your efforts. Hey, go ahead and make a decision here. It's your call, but I need to know about it so that I can maybe loop somebody else in,
Right.
put that on an agenda that so we talk about that decision that was made.
Yep.
Let somebody know. I mean, in a highly collaborative environment, this probably not going to be that uncommon to
Right.
need to
Right.
tell your decisions that
Right.
you make.
Exactly. And the
And so
decision. Sorry. Good.
I just comparing that to the first one, which is just do and tell. To be clear on that one, you're saying here's the parts of your job that just make the calls, and you don't need to communicate with anybody, or at least
Good.
you don't need to communicate back with me, the manager. There might be people that you're working with
Yes.
to
That's
communicate.
exactly right. Yeah.
So
It's
that
me.
just do it or do and tell is mostly related to you and your employee, not overall.
That's a good differentiation. When I say just do it and you don't have to let me know, there's probably others in your world you're going to need to talk to about it.
Sure. Yeah,
just to
yeah.
be effective.
It's
Right. Yeah.
good communication skills. Yeah.
You don't have to tell me. Right. This number two then is do, then tell for all the reasons you mentioned. Plus, the decision you just made might impact me later, and I don't want to be caught off guard, kind of thing. So, in any event, so the second level is do, then tell. The third level is consult, then do. These are things that when they come up in your world, I do want you to come talk to me. I want you to check in with me for consultation, for maybe for permission if that's needed, maybe for coordination and collaboration up front. So it's consult then do. The last level is don't do this. It's not yours. And
Right.
and, and this sounds really simple, but here's what we find is that and I'll tell you a couple of stories about it, but it's really, I think it's pretty common that these conversations haven't been had as far as how would you divide up this person's job in those categories. Like, do you, as my employee, let's say, or as my boss, are we on the same page? Do we have the same understanding? Because when we don't have the same understanding, there's all this misalignment, and someone's feeling over controlled, or someone's feeling angry
Mm.
that the employee's not taking initiative. And just a quick story about that. This was years ago, like a decade ago. I was coaching a manager and an employee separately, and the employee told me that this manager is just a terrible micromanager. I can't do anything without checking with her first. I'm always in trouble, or not in trouble. I'm afraid I'm going to get in trouble if I don't check with her first. So I
Mm.
always have to bring everything to her. And the manager tells me about that employee. This employee will take no initiative. She comes to
Hmm.
me with everything. She comes to me with all her questions. She won't do things. And what was so interesting was they literally wanted the exact same thing. They were stuck in this lack of communication, and they were misunderstanding and misreading what the other person wanted. And when I gave them this model, and they were able to sit down and look at this person's job and divide up all the tasks and responsibilities in these categories, they got on the same page.
Yeah. That's cool. That's really cool. That's not uncommon either, right? Where an employee and a manager, they actually have the same goals and
Right.
wants and needs, and
Right.
it just comes down to having the conversation or having a framework to look at the conversation through.
Mm-hmm.
So in this case, it's once again, let's look at your job, right? what can you just do without having to talk to me first?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
What can you just do, but then make sure you tell me after?
Mm-hmm.
And actually, in this case, it could also be just do it, and you might tell me after, although you might also tell me before, just so I'm ready for it, right? And then consult and then do, which is talk to me first. And on that level, on the consult and do, would you say that's your opportunity as a manager when you're consulting with them, that you might actually help them make that decision, or you feel like you actually have to make that decision as a manager? They're consulting with you, so
Yeah, there's
are
a
you?
range there. Yeah, yeah. I mean, it might be something that I need to have 90% say in on this, or
Mm,
even more. It might be something I just want 10% say in, but I have to have some say in it.
Right.
Maybe I need to provide you with more information. Maybe the thing you're wanting to do impacts the executive team that I report to, so I need to, be part of this. There's lots of reasons I would want you to consult with me. Also, though, and this is kind of a step further, the goal, and I don't mean in every case, but generally the goal is to move things up the list, or from a 3 to a 2 to a 1. So there might be something that in your work with me as my employee, I need you to check with me first on these sorts of things, but I hope in 6 months this won't be one of those things. We'll be on the same page, and you'll be trained or whatever. This future, in the future, can be something that you do and then tell. Right? Eventually, maybe it's something you just take care of. So the whole goal of this is to move people from less to more autonomy.
I like it. Cool. And then, uh, real quick again on the consult and then do, this is at some level, this could be, I like, these are the decisions I want to be able to make together with you. Like, that could be one aspect of it.
Mm-hmm.
Or it could be, the decision is still yours in this case, but I would like to provide some insight, some suggestions, some ideas. So,
Yes, that's well
as you're
put.
saying, the consultant in do has its own range
Yes,
within itself.
yes,
And
that's
then,
exactly right.
yeah, and then the last level is just don't do it, which is basically saying, no, don't make these decisions on your own. And even on this, it could be like, don't make these decisions on your own, but still come talk to me if you have a decision you want to make within these areas, or you think a decision should be made, but you're just being clear that's not your decision to make at the end of the day.
Yeah, that's about kind of role clarity, really. It's about what's in your purview and what's not. And some employees and managers don't really need to talk about that because it's really clear. There's been many other times I've seen there's a little bit of a pushing and pulling on this. And so
Yeah.
sometimes, there's a misunderstanding about what's within my range of control and what's not.
Yeah.
What's in my job, basically, and what's not in my job. And there's people sometimes who tend to swim outside their lane a lot, and they kind of need
Mm-hmm.
to be redirected back to their lane. That's what a 4 is about, is
I
let's
see.
get you back in your lane.
Good. Good. I like this one more time. Just do it, do and then tell, consult and then do, or just don't do it. And I want to come full circle again and come back to the concept of fear. Because I know for myself personally, as well as some other managers that I've coached, there's a fear here about almost misidentifying a job function or a decision and putting it in the wrong category. What I mean by that is, you say, you know what? Yeah, this parts of your job, just do it. But you're worried about giving up that control, because what if they don't, make the right decision there? You don't have total confidence in their decision making there. As I've thought about this, and I'd be curious to get your thoughts on this as well, is I almost think of this as a opportunity to experiment and learn and adjust. Meaning,
Absolutely.
whatever you land on, it doesn't have to be permanent. If you say, like, I would lean towards giving more autonomy as long as it's, a two-way door. And what I mean by that is, there's a one-way door, meaning if you make that decision, there's no going back on that. So we're kind of in a tough spot. A two-way door is, hey, even if you make that decision, we could recover from that and be okay. So it's those two-way door decisions that it's like, yeah, maybe lean on the side of giving autonomy, experiment,
Yep.
see how it goes.
Yep.
And what I find more often than not is that when you hedge towards giving autonomy, you're usually pleasantly surprised because people engage with that task or job or the decision at a higher level.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. Have you had that conversation with people as well? Kind of the fear about it not going well and having to pull back autonomy or so on and so forth.
Yeah, yeah, it's such a tricky balance. I really agree with the idea of that. There's risk involved to some degree in managing well, and you're talking about risk, and it's smart trust, of course. Like you said, I don't want to over risk. I don't want to get us in trouble. But if we can recover from that, if it doesn't go quite right, if we can use it as a learning experience, I would err toward more autonomy. And here's a balance. I would actually rather give autonomy than take it away, right? So
Yeah.
let's be smart about that. Let's start with maybe a little less autonomy and let's move toward more. But here's the key: you better be moving. And
Hmm.
also tell the employee that's what we're doing. Don't make this a surprise. Another quick story is a friend of mine years ago who moved to DC, take a marketing job, and he was so discouraged. He called me a month later and said, "I apparently I'm not the marketing director of anything. I don't direct anything. I have to go to my boss for everything." And then we don't talk for a year. And I talked to him a year later, and I asked him about, "Hey, how's that horrible boss? And how's that job?" And he's like, "Oh, I love my job. I love my boss." I said, "Well, what happened? Did you get a new boss? And what about that controlling boss that wouldn't let you make any decisions?" And he said, "Oh yeah, the next month I got more control, and the next month I got more control," and which was a great progression. But it would have been sure nice if the boss and my friend would have had a conversation about that's what's going to happen, is that these parameters of freedom are going to change over time. All right.
Yeah, that's cool. That's cool. It also just reminds me of, yeah, let's take the perspective of the employee, right? And what are some advice for that person that might be new on a job? And I think one piece of advice that you're alluding to is, be patient. At some level, you can't expect a ton of autonomy when you haven't even gotten through your training modules yet,
Right.
right? And you haven't even fully understood your job function.
Right.
And I actually heard this recently. It's like, I have no control in this job. Well, how long have you been in the job? Well, it's been about a month and a half. It's like, okay, we'll give it some time.
Right.
But
Right.
also, I think something to consider is if you are that employee that would like some more autonomy, maybe have the courage to initiate this conversation, like you said, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
hey, I want to talk about my job and I want to collaborate with you, manager, on where you feel like I can just make decisions, where you'd like me to consult with you on decisions, or where I shouldn't be making decisions on my own. And then maybe let's have a conversation about, hey, what steps should I take, or what experience should I get, or
Mm.
training should I go through to be able to start adding a little bit more autonomy to
The
my
way
plate.
the way you said that was so good, because I think sometimes employees go toward that conversation and they do it in more of a almost resentful, and I'm being oppressed and I want to pull autonomy back from you, boss. And why don't you trust me? And then the boss gets defensive. And the way you said that was so humble and it was so patient. And what would it take for me to be able to move into these greater areas of autonomy is such a better approach.
Cool. I love this. Good conversation. Anything more you want to say on this piece here?
No, no, I think have said what we need to say. And it's I guess maybe I would just end with lean in, right? Have conversations. That's the bottom line here. Have conversations.
Yep. Have the conversation. Good. Well, hey, real quickly before we go, I do just want to let all our listeners or watchers, since we're doing a video podcast this time, um, about our Managing with Mind and Heart online workshop. So, several times a year, we offer our cornerstone program, Managing with Mind and Heart, available to the general public to sign up for. It is a 6-part series. Sometimes we have it in 6 full days. Sometimes it's 12 half days. We experiment with that. But this is a program that I think at this point hundreds of leaders have gone through, if not thousands. Do you think thousands have gone through? Yeah,
Yeah.
so thousands of leaders at this point, yeah, have gone through. And so, um, Mike, can you let people know a little bit more about the maybe some of the takeaways and skills that they'll learn in this workshop series?
Yeah, briefly, the mindset of a manager, how we need to be thinking to be effective in terms of issues like morale and psychological safety and EQ and all that stuff. We're going to go through the top 15 management skills that According to research, these are what employees need from us for them to be successful. We're going to talk about how to help an employee, kind of coach an employee from a less helpful set of behaviors to a more helpful set of behaviors, and how to hold them accountable, but how to help get them there, including how to have the second and third conversation if the first one wasn't effective, how to lead a good meeting, lots and lots more stuff.
Yeah, lots and lots of good stuff. More more on autonomy, more on running one-on-ones, giving feedback, receiving feedback, sustaining change. I mean, it's a pretty comprehensive program. So, anyways, just for you, our podcast listeners, if you go to our website, nashconsulting.com, you'll see a place to register for that workshop series. And if you use the code Mind and Heart Pod when you check out, you will get 24% off.
24?
24 specifically. Don't ask why.
Okay,
But
24%.
when you register, once again, they'll ask you for any discount codes, and it's Mind and Heart Pod, one word, all spelled out. So, hope to see you there, and thank you for listening. All
Bye, everybody.
right. Bye.